Hello and welcome to the Workers' Party Campaign Talk broadcast. My name is Mark Belshaw and I'm a prospective candidate for the Workers' Party, and I'll be your host for this evening. For too long, the interests of profit and speculation have been put before the interests of people and community. We see the results everywhere: stagnating wages, crumbling public services, and a country that is constantly in decline. The Workers' Party of Britain is here to change that, and we stand firmly for the working people of Britain, for a real strategy to rebuild our country, and as a genuine alternative to the established political parties. Tonight, we'll be talking to just some of the people who've taken up the challenge of fighting for their local communities by standing as candidates for the Workers' Party of Britain. Our first guest, who I'd like to welcome, is Momosi. Hello, Momosi.
Good evening. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing fantastic. Yourself?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant to hear. Brilliant to hear. Momosi, can you tell us about yourself and about your local area?
Well, about me, first and foremost, I'm a Black African, brought up in a blended family, brought up by an Indian daddy, married to a German mother. That's the blended part of it. And it has helped me to have a better perspective about certain issues that come up from time to time or even on a permanent basis in any and every community that one's going to live in. And in my community, one of the issues that I am very passionate about is the rights and the rights and the capacity to express themselves and avail themselves of whatever will benefit them. That is the rights of, let me be politically correct here, the brown community and the Black community, the brown and Black females, because I'm particularly interested in the female. I'm a gender activist from get-go. And in Westminster, there's not, you could say on the one hand, Westminster is a rich place and they're well funded. But on the other hand, the choice of where those funds go depends on whoever's in charge at any particular time. And from my perspective, it will also depend on which councillor is in charge of a particular ward at a particular time. Because I want to believe we should be given the choice and the option of what is best for the community, because it's only somebody that lives within the community that knows what they actually need, not someone from high up above that will come and just dictate and say, this is what you should do, or this is what you shouldn't do. And a lot of the Black and brown community females very often feel reluctant to express themselves, reluctant to claim what is their right by law, reluctant to claim things that their children are supposed to have. A lot of them just go without simply because they don't really have the courage to step out of their comfort zone. And that's why somebody like me will be very, very useful for that, for the female community in particular, because I'm somebody that from a very young age, I've always been strong enough to step out of my comfort zone, to be of help to whoever needs it, whether they can read or write or they can't read or write. I mean, I've done basic things like actually writing letters of petition, letters of complaint on behalf of people who sometimes even within their cultural community, they are not really permitted to step into that role. So that's why people such as myself will be very, very useful. And that's just only one aspect of what interests me within my community.
Well,
So,
Momosi, you're certainly a fighter, and I can say that it's fantastic that you're joining us this evening.
thank you.
Now,
Can I
I
just
would
say
like to
another
welcome...
couple of words?
Oh, yes, by all means.
Okay.
Perfect.
Another aspect of what I am particularly interested in is I believe the government up above should allow people from within their communities to express themselves, to have freedoms. And a lot of the freedoms that we very often have taken for granted in the past are gradually being taken away from us. that is like freedom of expression, freedom to protest, freedom of political identity, cultural freedoms. In fact, there's so many. And I really believe we need to stand up and be counted and fight for our freedoms.
That's fantastic to hear there, Momosi. If you just hold with us 1 second, I'd just like to also welcome our second guest to the broadcast, John Homer. Hello, John.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, John. Yourself?
Yep, yeah, I'm looking forward to the meeting tonight, to the podcast tonight.
That's brilliant to hear, John. Now, can you just tell us a bit about yourself and a little bit about your local area?
Yeah, sure. So originally I'm from the Black Country and I've worked in mental health for my whole life. Feel very passionately about the care of people with mental health problems, which is about 1 in 3 of us in a lifetime. I've taken a long journey with that, and I'm now a cognitive behavioral therapist working online. I also care very passionately about the NHS, which I've worked in for the longest period of time. And we all know that that's in a lot of trouble right now. As far as politics is concerned, I've always had a passion for politics. Well, I would say from the age of 13, when my father bought the Encyclopedia Britannica, and I started to do my own history lessons, reading about some of the things that they didn't talk about in the school, such as, for example, the Russian Revolution and so forth. And I educated myself around socialist principles for a very long time. And that continued. For me, my work and politics go hand in hand. The NHS is such it always has been a political toy, if you like, in the hands of the politicians. I think that my involvement in politics has really, from a young age, I was in the Socialist Worker Party, which has changed quite a lot from what it was. I always voted Labour. I don't think many of us tonight are going to be doing that again. But I always had the faint hope that the Labour Party could really represent working people within this country. But that hope has gone now. So that's me. But as far as the local area is concerned, I live now in Nuneaton and Warwickshire. And if you don't know Warwickshire, Warwickshire is a county with a north and south divide. So the south being Stratford and Warwick and Leamington Spa, pretty well heeled, pretty much higher standard of living. I'm at the not so good end in Nuneaton, where I think that the standard of housing, the unemployment, the crime levels are so much higher. So that's the area that I'm representing, and I guess we're going to talk a little bit more about that.
It's fantastic, John, and I think we can all agree with that statement that I don't think many of us will be voting for the Labour Party anymore. So it's fantastic that we're able to put your skills and knowledge to better use at building a genuine socialist movement and a genuine alternative to the dead end that is now the Labour Party, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
But we'll just continue now, and I'd just like to welcome our third guest, Shahbaz Sarwar, who is currently a Workers' Party councillor at the moment. So, Shahbaz, would you be able to tell us a bit about yourself and about your local area?
Hi, Mark, and hi, everyone else. Pleasure joining you today. Politics is a love and hate subject. You love it sometimes and you hate it. I'm based in Manchester, stood for Longsight last year. It was a heavy campaign, I would say, where we took out the deputy leader of Manchester City Council, and we won that seat, and first and the only elected Worker Party councillor in Manchester at the moment. And I think that will double up, and we're looking forward to it. Manchester is a very diverse city, and I think it's got a lot to offer. And one of the things that we've seen is how Manchester is growing. I mean, when I look at coming into politics. Never in 100 years did I think of getting into politics, nor had the desire to get into politics. I think it was more of Palestine, where you start to probe into what's taking place in your own local areas and how it's working, and only to realize that those that represents us or should be representing us at the table were not holding our voices when even we look at the local issues. And that's where the interest of politics kind of came onto me. And from there, we just moved forward, and I have not looked back.
That's fantastic. Yeah, Shahbaz, it's great, great to see that you're fighting the fight on the ground and sticking it to the establishment and sticking it to the Labour Party particularly. So that's fantastic on your end.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, just back to you, Momosi. Firstly, I just want to ask what made you decide to stand for election and what made you choose the Workers' Party?
Well, first of all, I have great admiration for our national leader, that is George Galloway, and I've been following him on all the social media for quite some time now. And I don't just dip in, I sit and I listen. And I have listened to his policy statements, and that really drew me in, particularly when we are talking about not just local but international injustices and the way and manner the so-called top politicians are just trying to gloss everything over. They're trying to hoodwink us and bamboozle us, and a lot of the people fall for that. But he's somebody that he's got his two eyes widely and clearly open, and it really made me aware of so many things that are going wrong in this country. And reflecting back into my community, it opened my eyes as to a few things that are, that could be done better in my community. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of things that are just taken for granted, a lot of our so-called freedoms that are taken for granted, that are being taken away from us. And I feel it's important. Somebody has to stand up and be counted. Somebody has to stand up and lead, because so many people out there, they need the leadership, but they need the right leadership. They don't need somebody that people that are just out for the money or out just to be counted for the sake of it. We need genuine people, and that is what really moved me. And again, quite a number of the mothers, the women in my community, they know me because I'm somebody that reaches out. I will shout, I will make noise. And I think it's time for me to do it in an official capacity and not just, sit in a back room writing letters for people. Someone's got to be ready to come out from their comfort zone. If not, it's not going to happen. And I believe that the Workers' Party really is the only party that I can follow. It's the only party that makes sense. All the others, I'm sorry to say, they're deceiving us. They're abusing our public funds. They're not doing it right.
I think there'd be many people that would agree with you on that, Momosi, particularly around the idea that the established political parties don't represent people and they don't feel like a genuine alternative. But you
No, they
yourself
don't.
seem to be a genuine person who's standing for the policies and for the ideas that are crucial to them. So I think I'd say for everyone that we appreciate the fact that you're standing in your local area and standing
Thank
for the
you.
Workers' Party.
Thank you.
John, I'd like to approach you as well with the same questions. So what made you decide to stand as a local candidate and why did you choose the Workers' Party?
Yeah. So before the parliamentary election, I stood as a candidate in that. This will be the third time that I've stood for the party. Prior to the parliamentary election, we had the whole thing that had been going on in Gaza. And I guess this was a kind of a tipping point for me. There was a certain point in time, sure we'll all recall it, when Keir Starmer basically said that when asked about does Israel have the right to cut off the water supply and electricity to a population of 2 million people, most of whom are children, he said Israel has the right to defend itself. Now, at that point, that was when I just thought, okay, this has changed things now. It's even at that point, I was not a big fan of Keir Starmer. I wasn't a big fan of where the Labour Party was going since what had happened 2019, when many people, including one of our deputy leaders, Chris Williamson, was ousted from the Labour Party for anti-Semitism. Which we now understand just means people who have spoken out against a clear genocide of a population of people. By process of elimination, it wasn't difficult to arrive at the Workers' Party of Britain because you had, obviously the establishment, two main establishment parties were singing from the same hymn sheet. The Lib Dems were pretty much echoing that. The Greens as well weren't really making too many noises about it. I think now that's changed a little bit, but the only ones who've spoken against this genocide from the beginning is the Workers' Party of Britain. And I could pretty much say the same thing about the war in Ukraine as well, but I guess that's another subject. But, looking at the 10-point program, number one item, we need to leave NATO. They've led us into war after war after war. So for me, these things are connected. And it's by process of elimination, you just arrive at a point where you say there's only one party really that I can be part of right now, and that's the Workers' Party of Britain.
Mhm. I completely agree with you. I mean, my personal experiences, again, very similar policies, disillusioned with the kind of established political parties, and the words from Galloway, from Chris Williamson, effectively convinced me, to join the party. And I think for many others, they'd be in a similar boat, both myself and you, John, where there's just a feeling that the rest of the political parties don't really care, particularly about international issues, about NATO, about Israel, Palestine, about Ukraine, about all sorts of other issues that for most people don't even get airtime in the mainstream press, let alone get talked about by the mainstream political parties. But I'd like to bring in Shahbaz and just ask him, again, same questions of what made you decide to stand in your local area and why specifically did you choose the Workers' Party of Britain?
To be honest, like I said, I'm still looking for the answer why I stood, because I've never planned to stand as in politics. But really, it began with the frustration of Palestine. I think when you were looking at the screens and people were dying, and there's a genocide taking place, and you could see it unfold on a day in, day out basis, and it screamed out to you that you want to do something, you want to at least be a voice for them, if nothing else. And that's where it really began for me. And when you then start looking at local issues and you start realizing that the main parties have never worked for the people, it always has been party politics rather than people politics. And I think that hit me. And when I start looking at local areas and the issues that we have, the housing crisis and so on, and it made me think further that I should stand and see how I can make a change, how we can bring an independent voice to the table rather than being overset by mainstream parties, and they only speak and highlight issues that are with the party rather than with the people. And even now, as a councillor, when I go in and you raise issues on local issues on housing, on evictions.
Oh, I think we might have lost Shahbaz there for a second. We'll come back to him in a moment if we get him back. But if we can just we'll go back to you, Momosi. I know that Shahbaz was talking there about how the mainstream political parties don't really seem to care about local issues, and they seem to care more about internal party politics than they do about the local people, about local issues. So I just want to ask you, what are the main issues that you experience or that you've seen in your particular ward or your area, and what policies that you're standing on locally?
Well, like I said, first and foremost is the issue of the females in my community. Secondly, when I spoke about our freedoms being gradually withdrawn from us. That is freedom of expression, freedom to protest. And that, I believe, was impacted very seriously by the war in Gaza. I don't even call it a war, I'm sorry to say. I really, I challenge that word war. It's not a war, it's a genocide. And it's only recently, fairly recently, that some of the politicians have come out from behind their fences, come out from, their hiding places to actually acknowledge, because they suddenly realize, okay, if they agree and use that word, they're not going to go to prison. Like those of us who have come out on, on the beaten track, come out to protest and ended up getting arrested and, taken off to court. So anyway, moving on, I believe that one of the issues, apart from the issue of the female, is something that my co-discussant touched on: mental health issues, housing and lack of it, people being thrown out, although it's actually illegal now, definitely, to just get up and say this person didn't pay rent and therefore they're going to be thrown out. It's illegal. And I think that it's something that we need to be able to tackle at the grassroots level. We cannot afford any longer to take things for granted. And then there's the issue of the way and manner resources are being wrongly allocated, particularly in respect of our older population. Now, I'm going to admit on air, I'm over 65, I'm actually 68. And initially, I hadn't wanted to take this bold step because I felt that my age would act against me, but having thought about it and remembering and knowing some of the disadvantages that I'm going through at my age, I also have to make my voice heard on behalf of the elderly in Westminster. I live in Westminster, and my ward is Harrow Road Ward, which is part of Maida Vale. And there's a very high percentage of the older population who, many of them, don't know their rights, they don't know what they're entitled to, and they need some sort of leadership. And I feel that if I'm elected, not if, but when I'm elected as councillor for my ward, one of the key things that I would do is not just to have a weekly surgery, or say I'm going to have a weekly or twice weekly surgery, but to actually do it, because there are so many politicians out there. They say they will do this, they'll do that, they'll do the other. They only make promises before they're voted for, and once they get to that hallowed in quotes chamber, everything falls on its head, and they don't redeem their promises. So I think the issue of the rights of the elderly, the rights of the homeless. I'm saying rights. It's not just about give them somewhere to stay. They actually have rights, and they need that guidance. And nowadays, you go to a city, you need advice. They'll tell you, call Citizens Advice Bureau. I know how many times I've called Citizens Advice Bureau and been given different numbers, being turned round and round in circles. Oh, call this one. You call, nobody's there. Or you call, somebody says, oh no, that's not our department, or that isn't under us. Call a different zone, or call a different area. So these are things that we all take for granted, but they actually need to really be dealt with, and someone has to come out and say it and do the needful.
I completely agree with you, Momosi, and by the sounds of it, you have your finger on the pulse of your local area. And before you mentioned it, I wouldn't have thought you were a day over 30 when you were mentioning there.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
You're my friend forever.
And Shahbaz, I'd just like to ask you, what made you decide to stand as a local councillor, and why specifically did you choose the Workers' Party of Britain?
To be honest, I still look for that answer myself sometimes, because I never planned to enter politics, nor did I have the desire to do so. I really began with the frustration that we saw on the screens with what was taking place in Palestine, the unfolding genocide. To some extent, it still continues, even though ceasefire has been put in place. And I think with that, it was the probing in local areas where the communities actually stand, where the community was taking place, where the mainstream politics or the mainstream parties were disconnected from the people. And that was where we looked into, and I saw that local issues have never been resolved. People have been left on their own to do whatever they have to do to survive on their everyday life. And that's when I started to look more closer into getting into politics and became a candidate. And once we announced it, I think the person that really pushed me into politics was George Galloway himself. I've known George for a very, very long time, a very close family friend. And I've seen him and followed him for a very long time. And when it comes to wars, he has always been against wars. And that is something I stand on as well. I think wars bring nothing but disaster and chaos in those areas. Even when we look at today, millions of lives have been lost or destroyed because of wars. And it was that edge. I think I needed that little push, and that push came from George. And then that was it. We stood on the with the flag of Worker Party, and it was a very strong campaign here in Longsight in Manchester. And when we look at Worker Party, it stands out. It stands out for the people. It stands with the people rather than having its own party politics. And I think that's where George comes from as well. He speaks from the heart and he says it as it is, black and white. And that was the stance with Worker Party. And today I'm a councillor.
Spot on. That's fantastic to hear, Shahbaz, and I think we can all agree that many of us were brought into the party by the words of Galloway and by many of those around him in the Workers' Party. And he has brought many people together from all sorts of different political backgrounds on the left and has created quite a cohesive political party and a political force that can potentially continue going down the years and maybe even be have its own chance at power. But I would like to go back to John and just like to ask you, John, what are the main issues that you see in your particular ward and what are the main policies that you're standing on locally?
Yeah. So a bit of context is that this particular election that's coming up in Nuneaton is a local election. So some of them are council elections, and there is a question mark over whether there will be a Nuneaton council at some point. And also Warwickshire itself, they've put forward a plan to split it into north and south, which, going back to what I'd said earlier about this north-south divide in terms of wealth, could be catastrophic for the area. But some of the issues that have already been picked up on, such as the winter fuel allowance being taken away from the pensioners, is of course much more hard hitting in an area where the general standard of living is so much lower. And I suppose I don't want to pick on some of the people in Stratford, but I'm guessing that it's not going to hit them quite as hard. So reinstating that winter fuel allowance is something that councils can do. So that's certainly something that I would be fighting for. There's one issue that is fairly unique to Nuneaton is the amount of children who were affected by the SEND issue, because the Warwickshire Council had really badly messed up in terms of putting forward numbers of children who were going to be affected by that issue, which of course meant that they didn't get the funding that they needed. And I know this has hit other areas as well, but the overall impact of this is that there are large numbers of children in the schools in Nuneaton who don't. There's not the funding to put them in a special school. There is not the funding to give them the extra help that they need to get on track with their education. And what that's doing is it's causing all of the children to have their classes disrupted, because essentially you have children that need this extra input that aren't getting it. So the send issue is absolutely massive. I think as well. I don't know what the reason is for this. Some unkind people have made some judgments about the area, but it's known to have higher levels of mental health and learning disabilities for whatever reason. And so the issue is particularly hard hitting. But the other issues are really generic issues to any low income areas, poor housing, industrial areas perhaps that don't have those industries anymore. So young men that are essentially idle, we all know what happens when young men are idle. They get dragged into criminal activity and so forth. So there is a lot of strain on public services like the police. And watching what's happened to local NHS services is incredibly depressing, and you can almost tangibly see the impact on the local town centre. So I think that the previous campaign was always about trying to protect community assets, to sort of look at the disrepair of the buildings, look at the sort of support for local businesses, and essentially try and support the community into on a shoestring, of course, into being able to get where they need to be, which has been able to to work and to have good services and to be able to afford to pay for their bills.
Mhm. And like what you said there, John, I think there's probably seen across the entire country and in other local
Yeah.
areas as well, is that the burden of paying all of these bills off, of council cuts, of pretty much all of these things that are being forced onto local communities are being put on the most vulnerable shoulders. As you say, whether it's elderly with the winter fuel cut, or whether it's children with learning difficulties or special needs, they always seem to be the first ones to be
Yep.
put in front of the barrel, so to speak, when it comes to these sorts of cuts. And I think most people in their local areas, particularly after over a decade and a half of austerity on the Conservatives, and now, as it seems to be, continuing under the Labour. And then you've also heard the idea of the other people like the Lib Dems and arguably even the Greens at one point refusing to rule out the idea of cuts if they were ever to come into power. So it seems like cuts is the mantra within all the mainstream political parties. And the fact that you're able to stand with the Workers' Party of Britain and as a local councillor to be able to actually oppose that and actually offer a genuine alternative that isn't really being represented on the ballot paper for most people.
And if I could just add, Mark,
Mhm.
what I agree with what you said. What we need to do is to protect the vulnerable people within our communities, because this is a measure of a civilized society. And what we're doing is we're talking about cutting allowances for people with disability or mental health problems. They're even trying to shift the goalposts of what is a mental health problem. And this is not acceptable. It shouldn't, no matter what political party you're in, we should not allow this to happen. So I think we have to speak up.
Completely agree. Completely agree with you on that, John. I'd like to move on to Shahbaz, who you are currently a Workers' Party councillor. So you've already, put the foot to pavement. You've already done the canvassing. You've been elected as a councillor. So we'd just like to ask, what were the issues going on in your ward when you stood for election, and how you've gone about fixing them now that you're an elected councillor?
I think one of the main issues were being present. When we look at local councillors, they're not present in the wards. People sometimes don't even know who their councillor is. And it's being present and being active. I think that's what's required. I hold a surgery on a weekly basis, and people are well aware that the surgery is being held. And normally my surgery is 2 hours, and it goes on to 4 hours. That's how many people queue up for assistance and help. And majority of the times is housing, is fly tipping, is to do with youth, mental health services, elderly, a lot of homelessness, evictions, and cost of living. And when you look at local areas as well, I mean, I don't know if it's funding cut or is purposely done, but when you look at it, I think they're just neglected when it comes to local streets or local maintenance, and it's raising them issues. It's raising the houses issues. Many people that come to me with the housing concerns, a lot of them have overcrowded houses. They don't know what to do. You know, you've got 2-bedroom house with 4 to 5 people inside it. And when it comes to bin over tipping, bins collections, or bin services not being collected or missed, I think they're small concerns, but they build up over time. And also, when I look at in terms of my own area alongside, it has a huge diverse community there, so people from different background. It's a beautiful area, but it's a lot of businesses there, a lot of work needs to be done, and there's a lot of challenges. But I think the way I've done it, and I've made sure that I'm present in the community, they know where I am, I'm accessible to them, which is the most important. Where they raise the issue, those issues have been answered. That is another concern that they had, that they raise issues but they don't get answered, they don't get a reply back. Being active, they know exactly where I am on Tuesdays, they know exactly where I am on Fridays. I think that makes a huge difference. And it's not just from Longside. I get people from all over Manchester that come to me, and when I ask them why, you know, I'm only for Longside, they said we don't know who else to approach, and we know that you are here and you can get the work done. And so it's that relationship that you build with the community, because the real reason that I stood was to be the voice for the voiceless. And if I'm not delivering on that, then I think I fail them. And this is, I think, where Worker Party comes in. They give you that leverage, they give you that strength to push forward and help the community in every aspect, in every way you can. And when there's more of us, I think we'll be a stronger voice and we can make that difference that the community really needs.
Completely agree with you, Shahbaz. And I think everyone here, whether on the panel or watching on the broadcast, can blatantly see that you are a hard-working councillor and you're dedicated to your local area and your local community, and you're a complete asset to those people and a crucial lifeline for many. And I believe that your experiences as a councillor also give an example to people who are currently standing, to give them an idea of the challenges and the hurdles that they should expect to face should they be elected to their local councils.
Yeah, I think one of the things is you just have to be committed. You have to be committed to serve the people, and that is our requirement, and that's where we should be pushing. And once, I mean, when I look at it around in Manchester, like I said, I get people from all over, and it's that confidence that they have in me, that I can deliver for them, and I think that's what's required. And one thing that I am seeing is, because many people do not come from the political background, they have more to offer than somebody from a political background.
Completely agree. And I think just having dedication and grassroots links to everyday working people in your community puts you miles ahead of the current crop of politicians that we've got in many of the establishment parties, whether that be Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, etc. But I'd like to move on and look at our 10-point programme. As many of you will know, the only requirement to be a Workers' Party member is agreeing with the party's 10-point programme, the first point of which regards imperialism. And of course, sometimes we can get criticised for covering foreign affairs on our social media platforms because they say it has nothing to do with our country, whether that be nationally or on the local level. But staying with you, Shahbaz, is the party right to cover imperialism and war? And why do you think it's relevant to people where you live?
Yes, it is. When we look at the UK, we belong to somewhere. So we all come from a background from overseas. So when we look at immigrants, you know, majority of us are immigrants in this country, and we come from a sector, or we come from a background where war is taking place in that region, you know, because our forefathers were linked there, or, you know, our families are linked there. So it brings it to home. And when I look at even when we look at overseas funding, and we've cut back on helping overseas, we're only helping on 3%. We're providing aid to overseas. And when we are creating wars, we are obviously creating people that have no homes, no futures, and they will end up here. They will look for another life. They will want to start again. So when we are destroying someone's house, not realizing that they have no house, they will look here. So I think it's important for us to look at those 10 points. And when I look at those 10 points, every single point makes sense. It's about human rights, it's about working with people, it's about ownership, it's about having that realization that once we are we have to look at internationally, because it does affect us. It affects the people that live here, it affects the people that are linked to those areas. So I do think that whatever war or whatever takes place overseas, it automatically haunts us here.
That's fantastic, Shahbaz. And I'd just like to approach John with the same question. I know that you mentioned previously in the broadcast about how the issue of Palestine and issues in regards to the Ukraine war affected your decision to join the Workers' Party. So I'd just like to ask if our party is right in covering imperialism and war, and why you think it's relevant to the people where you live.
It's relevant in a number of different ways. I mean, my ancestors, if you like, probably were immigrants to this country as well, but a bit of a way back, right? And I think that this country bears responsibility for these wars that are creating refugees and immigrants that now become the target, if you like, of reform and so forth. They only want to talk about dealing with the problem. They don't want to talk about the reason why the problem happens in the first place. And we've talked a lot about Palestine, and so we should do, but maybe we should also be talking about some of the other genocides that are going on around the world right now, like Darfur in Sudan, and the things that are going on in Yemen and Myanmar. And perhaps they're not as relevant to this country, but the British Empire was responsible for the situation in Palestine from the very beginning. And so I think that for that reason it's relevant, but also as well, the cost of these wars on working class people in this country, regardless of their skin color or religion, is absolutely massive. We're all paying through the nose through our taxes so that we can send money for wars that I don't see have a real not serving our interests or anyone's interests, apart from arms dealers and people who are essentially investing in things. Somebody's making money out of it, aren't they? But I think that it can't be justified. And I think if people want to understand, well, where's all this money coming from for the 10-point program? How are you going to afford free public transport? How are you going to afford, tuition fees? How are you going to afford all these things? For one thing, we can start saving a bit of money by making peace with Russia and resolving the situation in the Middle East and resolving conflicts wherever they are. So this country bears responsibility, but it has an impact on us as well.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you on those questions, John. Again, we've got issues in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine. We've got the Ukraine-Russia conflict in Europe. We've got what's happening in Sudan, what's happening in Yemen. There's been the prospect of future wars as well, where there's the idea of a potential conflagration
Venezuela.
between Israel and Iran. We've got the current escalation between the United States and Venezuela, as well as Colombia. There's the proposal as well for them to intervene in Mexico. The French getting involved in the West Sahel region in West Africa. Like the list goes on and on and on. And like you say, only a handful of those are known about, because the mainstream media will only really report on a handful of them, and will even give a very heavily slanted perspective on those conflicts. And the majority of people in the general public who aren't keeping track of what's going on will probably only find out the truth of what happened, like we did with Iraq and weapons of mass destruction, many years after that war ends. So again, we seem to be in a never-ending loop of, once one war ends, another one starts, and there's a couple that are already ready to go. So if Ukraine wraps up or anything like that happens, they're going to look to go straight into Venezuela. So it's a mixture of things that needs to be like highlighted to people. And like you say, the cost of this to the British taxpayer. Again, they say that there's no magic money tree, but it always comes out in times of conflict. But I'd just like to move on and ask Momosi the same question. Momosi, what's your perspective on this in regards to the party's right to cover war and foreign affairs, and why you think it's relevant to the people where you live locally?
Well, looking at the cultural spread of the people in my ward, it's a multicultural community from north, south, east, west, Asia, Africa, Australasia, Europe, America, name it, because London basically is a melting pot. Now, I want to express an opinion, whether good or bad, that I believe it's time that Britain really stopped being political bedfellows with some of our international neighbors, starting with America, because it's leading us on a downward trend. Mm-hmm. A lot of our old-time politicians were really a bit too close, and I don't believe they had the interests of the country at heart. It was always, as far as I'm concerned, about self-interest. It was about having a colonial master mindset, which really tipped the scales against the common man. And as at how many years ago, the common man was, in quotes, British. And it is those same top politicians that changed the percentages or the cultural percentages of what now obtains in the United Kingdom. And with that colonial mindset, they used the citizens of all those countries that they were, I will say in quotes, in charge of, all those countries that they ran in and raped them of their whatever they had in those countries. The countries were not just culturally raped, but economically raped. The diamonds, the gold, the platinum, iron ore, name it, whatever those colonized countries had. Britain was very fond, sugar, tea, coffee, cotton. Britain was very fond of, I'll use the word raiding. Sorry, my mode of expression is quite basic, but I'm sure you understand what I am saying. All those nations were raided, and Britain, I think, became a bit too reliant and didn't have the foresight to even think that, okay, what we are doing now is going to impact negatively on the country years from now. Because now there's a group of the society that they say they are, in quotes, British, that they want Britain to remain purely British. That's never going to happen, because their fathers, their grandfathers, their forefathers went out and they raped all those countries and brought in people to come and fight their wars. And after bringing in people to fight their wars, do they think they're going to throw them all out? All this is affecting the politics that we have today. It's affecting our national economy. Now, I am, will I say, I don't know, first or second generation immigrant. My children will be third, and grandchildren, fourth generation immigrant. And all what has happened ultimately is affecting us. So Britain needs to get out of bed from this, to stop being political bedfellows to so many of these nations. Britain needs to open its eyes and be ready to deal with the mess that it's created. Particularly, like you said, in places like maybe Palestine, even France. Britain at some point, though traditionally they were, knocking heads, but at some point they were political bedfellows. And all this has to stop because it's causing a negative effect on the economy. You're talking about we're talking about Britain making cuts to save money. Like my fellow, I think it's John, spoke about, we have to stop spending billions of naira, sorry, not naira, I'm so sorry, billions of pounds every week, every month on arms and armament. It's a shit show. It's a national disgrace, because when we're spending all that money, how are we going to deal with homelessness? How are we going to deal with the job problem? One thing I want to add, although it's not about on the international scale, I feel one suggestion that I would have made as a councillor would be for us to look at how many vacant homes there are, not just in my community, but in every community. There are so many vacant homes owned by these rich people. And we should be thinking about how to help that homelessness crisis, the housing crisis, by converting those empty homes into homes for people. It's not about offering anybody money. The people who own these houses should understand you cannot have 10 homes. You come from some, I don't know, forgotten country, and you have 10 homes in London and nobody's staying in any of them. Give us those homes. We need to help the people, because the party that I belong to now, George Galloway's party, we're here for the people. We have to start doing something now. And I think as councillors, we're not just responsible for dealing with issues in our area. We're also responsible for pounding that beaten track to the politicians at the higher level, and really grab hold of their shirt tails, grab hold of their collars, and make them give account of what they are doing. Make them give account and help us to help the people, because they're not going to stoop down from their high horses to come and help the people. And it's the people that are suffering as a result of what's happening, in Westminster, as a result of what's happening at the higher levels. Somebody has to stop being hypocritical. I'll use that word. They are all a bunch of hypocrites, and they all need to be re-educated about the meaning of politics, not the meaning of being political, but the actual meaning of politics, which is for the people, with the people, by the people. So I'm sorry if I've kind of gone
No,
off track.
that's spot
I
on,
am
Momosi. That
very,
you're
very
a genuine fighter, and everyone here can hear the motivation that you have behind your voice. And I think many people can agree that the Britain as a country is still living in the dreamland, that it's still an empire, that it's still the dominant power in the world, which the empire left
that
decades.
empire has crashed.
It's gone. We're
And they're
effectively
not.
reliant on the Americans
Yes.
to basically keep ourselves afloat. All that's left of the empire is the city of London. That's the only thing in the country that seems to be catered towards as well. And like you say, in regards to local issues as well, like housing, when people are talking about, when you say someone will complain about migrants and stuff taking over houses, many times when they talk that, they don't talk about, say, the person abroad who buys up 10, 20, 30, 40, 50
Yes.
houses, apartments, flats in London,
It's
and
a
then just leave
disgrace.
them empty because they see housing as an investment rather than as a right that people should have. And you shouldn't end up with situations where people can buy out entire housing blocks and then they just get mothballed and no one gets to live in them. Like, I think that's something that you've touched on there, which is crucial, that needs to be brought up not just on a local level but also on a national level as well. So I think many people would agree with that. But in regards to that as well, in regards to what other people are thinking, and many people who've heard you and everyone else speak, Momosi, why do you believe that others who are potentially watching us today on this broadcast, why should others be a candidate for the Workers' Party of Britain?
For these exact reasons, because what we are doing, we're not doing it on our individual behalves. We're doing it for everybody. So everybody needs to open their eyes and accept the reality of the world that we live in, of the country that we are in now. That's a really, really strong reason, because there's no home you'll go into that you won't find someone who will stand up and say, look, I have a problem, financial problem. Like as John said, maybe 1/3 of us in the whole country have gone through or are currently going through mental health crisis. There is always something to fight for. And I believe that if there's 10 people out there that are thinking of becoming a candidate for the Workers' Party of Great Britain, there's always got to be at least one strong reason why they should do it. It's not about being apathetic. This isn't the time for anybody to say, oh, it's not my business. Oh, let them get on with it. Oh, I'm not going to vote. If you don't vote, if you don't become a part of the change that is so desperately needed, that change isn't going to come up. It's just not going to happen. And there's so much in this country that needs to change. It's not enough just to say, oh, it's not my fault. I'm not the cause. I didn't do it. So why should I? We need that change. And everybody needs to come on board. Don't think that, oh, if I go in, I wouldn't make much difference. Even if you can make a 0.5% difference in the progress, in the capacity of your community, that 1%, that 0.25%, it's better than nothing. So I think everybody needs to really open their ears, open their eyes, pick on one thing that you know you're really interested in. It could be mental health, it could be housing, it could be education, particularly education, because now I'm not sorry to say I'm angry about there's certain issues within the educational system that are being approached in the wrong manner. And I'm talking specifically about the gender crisis that our educational system is copying from America. By gender crisis, I'm referring, as an example, to a little girl that went to school somewhere in the UK in the last couple of years. She had a tail pinned to her back, and she said to her teacher, I identify as a cat. I'm a cat. And the teacher said, no, you're a little girl. And she said, no, I'm a cat. This child goes home and complains to her mother. And the mother comes in steaming and storming to school. And the upshot of this whole thing was the teacher got sent away for telling that child that you are a little girl, you're a child, you're not a cat. What is going wrong? A lot is going wrong. So there's a lot of people out there that will have certain genuine reasons to come in, come and be counted. Let that be your legacy. If you're a young person, you have a lot going for you. Come into this political train. It's a moving train. George Galloway isn't talking through his nose. He's talking facts and figures. He's talking reality. He's confronting the reality for what it is. If you're an older person like me, don't be ashamed and think, oh, I'm too old for this nonsense. It's not nonsense. It's real. And we all have to be a part of it. So don't be scared. Just do it.
Well, Momosi, I think everyone can agree that your passion is infectious, and everyone here agrees with pretty much everything that you've highlighted there. And I think many people will be motivated by what you've said this evening, and hopefully they'll chuck an application in, and we'll get many more people from that. But John, do you agree? Have you got anything to add in regards to why you think others should be standing as a candidate for the Workers' Party?
I mean, I love those. I love the passion, Momosi, and I think that we're all here. If you like, if people are watching and thinking about standing, then maybe we're role models to them, and I think you certainly are. I would like to say something about when I first stood in the parliamentary election. the reasons behind it were that actually I joined the Workers' Party of Britain, and there was an existing candidate, but he dropped out at the last minute for personal reasons, and I thought to myself, who am I going to vote for now? I don't want to vote for any of these mugs. And then I thought to myself, well, okay, hang on a minute. All right, I'll stand. I'll vote for myself. Right now, I think what I've learned, since this is the reason to do it, is because when you stand up for what you believe in, you're free. The truth sets you free. You can speak to people and you're not lying to them, about what you're going to do. And then as soon as you get into a position of power, you start taking backhanders and do what the fat cats want you to do, which is the reason why those houses are mothballed in the first place, and the reason why we're not able to get the tax off of these fat cats in the first place. This is a huge problem. When you stand as a candidate for the Workers' Party of Britain, you're free to say whatever you want. You're free to say the truth, and that is liberating. And speaking to people on the street, I don't know. I know these two comrades here have done this as well. You go and speak to people on the street, and they ask you questions. You don't have to lie to them. You can tell them the truth. You can say what we're saying right now. We know what the problem is. And so it's kind of addictive, because once you've done it, you think, well, now if I don't stand, who are people going to vote for? Who am I going to vote for? So I think that it's a worthwhile thing to do, and I think you'd feel proud of yourself, and so would your family feel proud of you as well. So that's enough reasons for me.
That's spot on, John, and I think many people can agree that they've spent many elections looking at the ballot paper, dejected, seeing that there's no option on there for them. And like you say, if you can't see an option on there for you, then put your name down. You stand, put your name on that ballot paper for other people. And like you say, there's the freedom in being able to say what many other politicians and parties can't. Yet the other parties end up with empty talking points that they've got to check with their PR teams before they say anything to make sure, is this going to get me votes? Is this going to be ostracize me from the voter? Whereas, as you say, with ourselves being in the Workers' Party, we have that freedom, we have that luxury to be able to approach everyday people as a member of that community, as everyday people, rather than being parachuted in as politicians from areas miles away from where we're claiming to represent. And I think that's key, again, like you say, that if you don't see any change in your local area, then be that change and actually put your name down and fight for what you believe in. And now I'd like to approach Shahbaz again with the same question. Why do you believe that people watching this should stand as a candidate for the Workers' Party?
I think they should stand, and there's a need to stand. One of the fears that we have is that we don't have a political background, or we're not involved in politics. I wasn't, and today I am. Did I make a change? Yes, I made huge changes. Can I improve individually? Yes, I can. And we have been doing for the community as well. So standing for a worker party as a candidate means joining a movement of like-minded people that can build and get things done. And I think that's what's required. On a locally level, things can happen. And it can only happen if more of us can join, more of us can raise that voice. It looks difficult, and it can be difficult, but we can make a difference. And I think majority of the time we look at, do we just lobby from on sidelines? And we need to be more involved. And this is why I think it is important to make real improvements for people, when we can come together and we can stand with the Worker Party. It gives us a platform and tools to make tangible changes, and that's what's required for the residents, while helping to build a movement that reshapes our areas, our decisions, our country. And for this reason, I do feel that, as long as you can make yourself committed, have the compassion and the courage to stand, one should come forward and should not ignore to stand, because we can make that difference and we can make that change. And I'm a good example in Manchester. being the only one councillor standing here. And I used to think individually, will I be able to make a change? And only when you get to work and you know get on with things and you take it seriously and you start to realize I have made a huge change in the last year. Encouraged people to come on board, encouraged people to speak out for themselves, speak out for the community, speak out for their area. So more that we stand, the more we can voice for the voiceless. So for this reason, I do think that we should come forward, we should stand. And like everyone said, Worker Party gives you that freedom of opportunity to speak as you wish. And it's having that clarity that you're not being led by a party, you're led by people. I think makes a big difference, because what I've seen.
Shahbaz there again for a second. I think we'll give him a minute and see if he comes back, because I think he just lost
the
his
sound
connection.
was going as well, wasn't it?
Just a little bit by the end. Well, before we sign off, I want to take a moment to sincerely thank our fantastic candidates who've joined us this evening. Your commitment to fighting for local working people is inspiring, and I thank you for taking the time to share your campaigns and highlight the crucial battles that are being fought in your areas. So I'd like to thank you, Momosi, John, and Shahbaz for being able to attend this broadcast this evening.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Spot on. Thank you all for coming. Right. And if what you've heard this evening has motivated you to get involved, then visit theworkerspartygb.org and click the Become a Candidate link to submit your application. And also tune in at 5 p.m. this Sunday, 9th of November, for our third instalment of our NHS Call the Doctor series, featuring Deputy Leader Chris Williamson with Dr. Bob Gill, where you can listen in and call Bob on our Twitter X space. And finally, I want to thank every single person who tuned in and engaged with this broadcast. And if you agree with what you've heard tonight, please share this video, let your friends, family, and colleagues know there is a genuine alternative. And again, thank you all for joining us.